Good evening, everyone. I hope you are having a good Sunday. We're about to be uh, be on Thanksgiving, which is good. I know that at this time in the year and some change now, there's a lot to have mourned, but there's also a lot to be thankful for, and sometimes things to be thankful for you'd be hard pressed to find them amongst so much crazy. Anyway, I don't want to talk about Thanksgiving right now. Thinking about food right now makes me a little tired. So, I woke up from my brief nap, made some coffee, and sipping on it now. Welcome to my page. Have a seat. Stay a while. I'm going to read a section out of my book. Not my book, a book I'm reading. I'll show you here. If you watch any of my other videos, I actually talk about this book a little bit. From David Barton. Setting the record straight in black and white. Today, a couple of things I'm going to be talking about, or reading in, at least, is Reverend Henry Garnet. Sit and stay for a while. We're going to find out who he is. Now, what is slavery? Too well do I know what it is. I was born among the cherished institutes of slavery. My earliest recollections of parents, friends, and the home of my childhood are clouded with its wrongs. The first sight of that met my eyes was my Christian mother enslaved. Garnet then reviewed the prominent historical leaders of both church and state who had strongly opposed slavery. Augustine, Constantine, Ignatius, Polycarp, Maximus, and the most illustrious lights of the ancient church denounced the sin of slaveholding. Thomas Jefferson said, at a period of his life when his judgment was matured and his experience was ripe, quote, there is preparing, I hope, under the auspice of heaven, a way for a total emancipation, end quote. The sainted Washington said, near the close of his mortal career, and when the light of eternity was beaming upon him, quote, it is among my first wishes to see some plan adopted by which slavery in this country shall be abolished by law. I know out of one way by which this can be done, and that is by legislative action. And so far as my vote can go, it shall not be waiting, end quote. Patrick Henry said, quote, we should transmit to posterity our abhorrence of slavery, end quote. So also thought this Congress. The other day when the light of liberty streamed through this marble pile or building, and the hearts of the noble band of patriotic statesmen leaped for joy, and this our national capital shook from the foundation to dome with shouts of ransomed people. Then, methinks the spirits of Washington, Jefferson, the Jays, the Adams, and Franklin, and Lafayette, and Giddings, and Lovejoy, and those of all the mighty and glorious dead remembered by history, because they were faithful to truth, justice, and liberty, were hovering over the august assembly, though unseen by mortal eyes. Doubtless, they joined the angelic choir and said, Amen. The Reverend Garnet then concluded by calling on the state to ratify the amendment passed by Congress. Let the verdict show, or let the verdict of death which has been brought in against slavery by Congress be affirmed and executed by the people. Let the gigantic monster perish, yes, perish now, and perish forever. Let slavery die. It has had a long and fair trial. God himself has pleaded against it. Its death warrant is signed by God and man. Do not commute its sentence. Give it no respite or reprieve. Let it be ignominiously executed, put to death with shame and horror. Honorable senators and representatives, illustrious rulers of this great nation, I cannot refrain this day from invoking upon you, in God's name, the blessing of millions who were ready to perish, but to whom a new and better life has been opened by your humanity, justice, and patriotism. You have said, let the Constitution of the country be so amended that slavery and involuntary servitude shall no longer exist in the United States, except in punishment of crime. They're talking about the 13th Amendment. Surely an act so sublime could not escape divine notice, and doubtless the dead has been recorded in the archives of heaven. Favored men and honored of God as his instruments, speedily finish this work which he has so given you to do. Emancipate, enfranchise, educate, and give the blessing of the gospel to every American citizen. Noted 113. So as before, I will go there first, because I want you to be able to go exactly where this is, because I do believe it is important. That is Garnet Memorial Discourse, page 85, 88, and 89. And I will continue. Oops, sorry. This was a monumentous event. Listen to this next sentence. The first black American to speak in the Capitol, and he delivered a powerful sermon. Maybe some of you thought that up until this moment, who I was speaking of or quoting or reading about was some funky old white man. No. Interestingly, at the beginning of the recorded sermon is a revealing message of thanks passed by the leadership of Reverend Garnet's 15th Street Presbyterian Church in Washington, D.C. The church trustees were so pleased with the honor bestowed on their pastor that they passed a resolution declaring in part, whereas the chaplain of the House of Representatives, Reverend William H. Channing, together with a number of the Republican members of the House, believing that it would be eminently wise to prosper, or to, eminently wise and proper to have some public religious service to commemorate such an auspicious event, requested our pastor, Reverend Henry Highland Garnett, black man, to deliver a memorial discourse on the second Sabbath of February 1865. Therefore, resolved that the thanks of the congregation be tendered to those members of the Senate and House of Representatives who voted for said amendment. Notice in this resolution of thanks that it was the Republican members who had Reverend Garnett to speak. The Democrats in the House did not join in inviting him to preach his sermon. Yet, this is not surprising given the demonstrated attitude of the Democrats toward blacks at the time. And it is not surprising considering the Democratic opposition to traditional public religious expression and activities still demonstrated today. Now, this portion I'm going to read is from a part of their documents, which I'll also show you. Whereas the chaplain of the House of Representatives, Reverend William H. Channing, together with a number of the Republican members of the House, believing that it would be eminently wise and proper to have some public religious service to commemorate such an auspicious event, requested our pastor, Reverend Henry Highland Garnett, to deliver a memorial discourse on the second Sabbath of February 1865. Therefore, resolved that the thanks of the congregation be tendered to those members of the Senate of House of Representatives who voted for said amendment. The church resolution noted that it was Republican members who asked the Reverend Garnett to preach the sermon. I'm going to show you right here. If you want to, you can pause it, read it yourself. I shall go on. And just right quickly, so you can see exactly who, or rather, this dude right here. That is Reverend Henry Garnett. Kind of looks like fair-skinned me, huh? Anyway, I'll go on. For example, even though nearly 80% of the nation supports voluntary spoken prayer in public schools, noted 115, I'm going to go there too. Because, as I said before, I think it's important for me, it's important for you to be able to actually see these things. And if I note them as they are noted here, then you can go there too. The Gallup organization, most Americans support prayer in public schools. CNN.com, North Texas School, administrators to comply with the Supreme Court ruling on student prayer. All right. Now, that was 115. Only 13% of House Democrats voted for the recent constitutional amendment to permit it. However, 87% of Republicans voted for that amendment. And even though almost 80% of the nation supports public display of the Ten Commandments, only 21% of Democrats voted for a congressional bill to allow those displays. 91% of Republicans did so. Consider, too, the congressional bill to remove IRS control from over the pastors, from over what pastors can say. A bill that would reinstate freedom of speech to American pulpits exactly the way it had been before Democrat Lyndon Baines Johnson in 1954 had the IRS code amended to restrict speech in churches. So 119, right? Let's go there. House of Worship Free Speech Restoration Act, 108th Congress. And so, only 5% of Democrats, I won't go to each one of these. You can get the book. 5% of the Democrats voted to allow free speech for churches, but 76% of Republicans voted that bill. And on the vote to protect biblical institution of marriage between one man and one woman, only 6% of Democrats voted to protect that God-ordained institution. 88% of Republicans did so. There have been many other voted in Congress demonstrating a general Democratic hostility toward laws protecting public religious expressions, similar to their actions a century and a half ago when they would not join in inviting Reverend Garnett to deliver his sermon. At about the same time that Reverend Garnett preached his sermon, another first in black history occurred. Republican Senator Charles Sumner nominated black attorney John Rock, who also is both a licensed doctor and a licensed dentist, as the first black American to become a member of the United States Supreme Court bar. John Rock was then introduced before the United States House of Representatives, becoming the first African American attorney to be introduced in Congress. Noted 123. I'm going to share that one with you as well. Dictionary of American Negro Biography, S.V. Rock John Sweat. So, and here is Rock John Sweat. You know. I'll continue that in a little while myself. So I'm reading that. And thinking about all of what I've been watching and listening to, and in conversation with others, and I like that book. I like that author. He's very matter of fact. Here's the resources. He's a white author pointing out black history. and white history and ideologies. It was a black pastor with a Republican ideology that requested the 13th Amendment be changed up to say specific things. If you're a criminal, this is for you. We want slavery ratified. We want it to be gone. He spoke this for a whole bunch of white folks who agreed with him most. Those who had a Republican ideology, not all, we know that, but the vast majority. And then on the other end of the spectrum of ideologies, the Democratic ideology, the vast majority wanted to keep slavery. And anyone that carries a democratic ideology, and the vast majority, have historically wanted slavery, wanted oppression, wanted. Not just think it's a great idea, it's power. The vast majority, not all. I was talking to someone today about how crime is starting to climb exponentially. My friend told me yesterday after I got home that his car had been stolen. And they had it on video. Because the place where we live has a video next door to it. Video camera, security camera. Sure enough, we saw this black truck back on up in broad daylight. Somebody hopped out, jumped in his car after they jimmied it, and took off. What's sad is the conundrum by which this happens. On one end, as I was talking to my friend, he said in quotations, well, they just needed it. And I was like, yeah, so did my friend. He needed it, in quotations. It's his. And I found myself mad for a couple of reasons. One, mad because somebody stole his stuff where he needed it. He was going to go, which he finally did. The person that stole his car, side note, he did get it back about a couple hours later. They stole his car, went to another apartment complex, parked it, jumped out, got another car, jumped in that car, stole that car, and left his car. And so, it's really frustrating because of ideologies to a degree. Stop. My bird's sitting there pecking at my pictures. Because of these ideologies on both sides, we've gotten here. Crime is going crazy because people know to a degree nothing's going to happen to them. If I commit a crime, it's going to be okay. It doesn't matter. Court system's overrun because of ideologies and policy changes. And it's not because on one end they thought it was just like this will be the best thing for the masses, right? this policy change of defunding the police and mass mandates to get a poke. This is going to be the best for the masses. It's all about power. Our governor here in California does not care about the people. He cares about his pockets. He does not care that, and his cronies do not care about my friend or anybody else, any other body, any other human who is being violated because of these democratic ideology policies being passed. Well, how could you say that, William? Well, just look around. You just look around. Talking about blacks are being hurt and being taken down by the police left and right and da 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 da. That's just not true. It's not. I'm not saying that there's some police that need to be released from all duty ever again from being a police officer because they're power tripping. I agree there. But this idea that all cops are bad and we should just get rid of all cops, no, we shouldn't. And here's why. Because then you have what's happening across the nation. The criminal mind takes hold. Now, there's a couple of perspectives I want to talk about on the criminal mind. Some people, I get, like for instance, I can't eat, I need to feed my family. Okay. Well, I'm just going to go steal somebody's car so I can do that. And if I can't use it because there's not enough gas in it, I'll find another car to steal. That is the Grand Theft Auto mentality. You wreck one, get rid of one, can't use one anymore, you go find another one. And you just keep doing it and doing it. It never stops. The injustice doesn't begin with the person who has their property stolen or vandalized. The injustice begins in the fact that we're not asking the question, how do we create programs that are going to resource people and say, you've got to get better. If you don't want to get better, you don't have to get better. But you've got to get better. And so then people turn to crime on one hand because maybe, just maybe, they're trying to feed their babies. But that is rarely the case. Why would I say that? Because if crime makes everything easier, then it doesn't matter who I've got to feed as long as I can feed my desire to have what I want, when I want, how I want, wherever I want, whenever I want, no matter who it's from. It takes hold. It doesn't matter. It is a deep, dark tunnel of lies. And we can trace it back to these ideologies. And I'm not saying that all democratic ideology is at fault. I am saying that it's heavily flawed, but also is the Republican ideology. It's flawed too. And there's people that are crooked on that side too. And we're not coming to the middle and saying, how do we we're spending all this money and making all this, not making money, we're creating new money, right? For what? It's losing its value. It doesn't matter. What we could do is say, let's create these programs that say, look, you don't get to just continue in your addiction anymore. But if you want to get better, absolutely. We're here for that. we're here for that. If you want to continue in the addiction that in some ways these ideologies have made more available, drug addiction and all these, dot. It always kind of seems to go back to that root. Those that are in power that scream about injustices and the rich, not paying their fair share. They are the rich, most of them. They're just mad that they're not the ultra rich, so they got a beef with the ultra rich. And I'm not saying that all rich people don't do the right thing. I know that they just people are people. So we keep doing this, or this, but we're not doing a lot of this. And generally, when we've said, well, you're pointing back at yourself, we're also not taking into account that, yeah, there's fingers pointing back at me, but that doesn't mean I don't speak truth at those I'm pointing a finger at and saying, hey, you got to. I know, me too. It's interesting to me. So interesting. You ever think about this? You ever think about this? BLM yelling Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter. And they're, creeping up more, from here and there, but they're really running out of steam because their ideology is just taking root. It's on autopilot now. And you're starting to see that Black Lives Matter, the organization, really doesn't care. They don't. The vast majority do not care. They just don't. If they cared, they would be creating programs in all communities to help all people. No matter the color. To build healthier communities. If they really cared, they would start dogging out black men that are black fathers who decide that they don't want to stay around for their children. And let's get this straight. Black men don't have kids with just black women. Black Lives Matter just can't be about black skin matters, because let's just call it what it is. Black skin matters. That's what this is. If all the rest of my body looked like that, I wouldn't matter according to the organization Black Lives Matter. Surely I wouldn't. And I barely matter to Black Lives Matter, the organization, because of this black skin. It's true, man. They don't care. All they care about is their selfish greed because they got hurt at some point and they figured out how to run a bait and switch program that pays out dividends to one or two people. That's all. That's all they've done. That's really all they've done. And some that have been a part of Black Lives Matter or were a part of them or were really excited about them in the beginning, like myself. I was caught up in the same ideology. Hoped, just like we hoped when we had our first black president, that things for black people would just be better. It didn't get better, and it wasn't because whites were just upset about having, a black president. Nah. The ideology with the first black president. If you just listen to how he speaks now, and listen to his wife, how she speaks, same ideology, positioning. They really don't care about Americans. They barely care about black folks, especially black skinned people like myself who do not share in the same ideology that they do. I mean, and think about it. Speaking of ideologies, the current administration, Mr. Joseph and Josephine, how to call them that, Joseph and Josephine. You think about this. Would you, would you, let's think about it. Would you, if you were running for whatever position in office, and you knew you were running against a racist, right? Or let's even say a misogynist, or a rapist, or a pedophile, or a mass murderer, right? You were running against them, and you knew that's what they were, and they got all the votes, and then they said, "Hey, why don't you come run with me?" And you went and ran with them, although you were like, I'm against whatever ideology or actions you've been taking. Would you really run with them? Would you? No. Any sane person wouldn't do that. That goes to show you even more that it really is about power and ideology. Joseph doesn't care about black people, nor does his token. She don't care about black people either. And she surely doesn't care about black women, or any women for that matter. Just take a closer look. You see, Black Lives Matter organization really cared about black skinned people, they would be helping all skinned people to come together. But all that they've done, along with other organizations like them, have created a civil war where you have white folks telling black folks that you are oppressed, and if you don't believe that you are, then you need to be retrained and you need to learn, or you're evil, or and even black folks, if I've come up against folks like this who told me I'm a sellout or Uncle Tom or a coon. It's really interesting. If you look in the 20s and 30s and 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and to a degree 90s, that's what it is. We're right back there. It's the bait and switch. I told my friend today, whether you consider yourself to be a Democrat or Republican or whatever, maybe it would be just helpful if we stop saying you're a Democrat, or I'm a Republican, or I'm a Libertarian, or how about you go with the Democratic ideology, I'm an American. You go with you're an American, you go with this ideology. I'm an American, I go with this ideology. That's a black person, that's a white person, that's an Asian person, that's a Hispanic person. How about that's an American, they're white. I'm an American, I'm black. They're an American, they're Hispanic. They're an American. They're Asian. The democratic ideology just wants to divide. And the democratic ideology that has been so prominent in our nation doesn't want to bring anybody together. It only seeks to push us further and further apart. Because if they really wanted to bring us together, maybe they would care to tell us about the black men who actually were prominent in American history, who were Americans, some who were slaves but no longer, who fought for my rights to be where I'm at, as well as my other brothers and sisters' rights to be where they're at. So sad. Because here we are. Here we are. The democratic ideology that rules the day, and in some ways it's a response to the Republican ideology that went to the extreme too. Hopefully we find ourselves in the middle. But even before then, I hope that we continue to find each other as Americans, whatever color you may be, man or woman, and say, let's be American together. Let's value one another as Americans. And then, as who we are, where we come from, our history, the good, the bad, the ugly. But we must have a resolve to first be Americans and fight together as Americans against any other ideology that seeks to divide us, seeks to destroy us, seeks to overtake us as Americans. Period. And then, as Americans, we can start addressing some of these tyrannical movements and ideologies that have become so prevalent in our country. Leave a like, comment, subscribe, keep it respectful. Have a great day.